So, Mr. Kramer, you probably saw the debate last night, and actually the focus was more on foreign policy, but I would say not that much on human rights issues and also on the issue of freedom, which is, of course, mainly in your interest. So, what would you say? What would be the main challenges for the next United States president when it comes to these values?
Not too far from here in parts of Eurasia, we see rollbacks in democratic freedom. We've seen that in Ukraine. Belarus remains a tremendous challenge. It continues to be the last dictatorship in Europe, as was described in the Bush administration. And Russia, we're seeing almost on a daily basis now human rights abuses in Russia. So the huge challenges around the world. And China, of course, is also one. The largest country in the world, 1.3 billion people who live, according to Freedom House's rankings, in a not free country. So lots of challenges everywhere around the world.
What are like the biggest difference between President Obama and Governor Romney when it comes to that issue?
Well, Governor Romney doesn't have a track record on foreign policy. He hasn't had an opportunity to engage in it. President Obama now does have almost 4 years of a track record on this. And I have to say I've been disappointed by his performance in this area. Initially, I thought when he came to office, that he was taking what we would describe in the U.S. as an ABB approach, anything but Bush, because George Bush was associated with the freedom agenda. And I think to President Obama and others in his circle, Bush discredited the notion of democracy and promoting freedom. So he wanted to distance himself. But I would say since then, we've seen that this isn't an issue that's near and dear to the president's heart. He's very much a pragmatist. Some would describe him as a realist. And promoting these fundamental freedoms and human rights, I would say has not been at the top of his list. I'm sure if the president were sitting here or one of his defenders, he would disagree. But based on what I've seen and witnessed over the years, and I served in the Bush administration, by the way, to be clear, I think we also made a number of mistakes, but there was a very strong interest at the highest level from the president in promoting freedom and human rights around the world. Doesn't mean we did a perfect job of it by any means, but I don't think the current administration has either.
Okay, so who would be the better candidate?
Well, we'll find out on November 6th. Whether that's the better candidate or not, the American voters will go to the polls and decide which man they want to lead the country. So we'll find out.
But let us get back to Syria, because you also said in a blog post on the Huffington Post, that the United States should focus on Syria, and that to make sure that there will be a transition to somehow democratic government. What kind of democratic government do you think could be installed in Syria?
Well, first thing is we have to stop the slaughter. There are now over 30,000 people who have been killed under the Assad regime. It's spreading into other countries in the region with the terrorist attack in Lebanon. Jordan is suffering from a huge inflow of refugees, the same in Turkey and in Iraq and elsewhere. So the first step is to stop the bloodshed and bring about a change in the leadership in Syria. The second is to encourage a transitional government that respects human rights, that understands the importance of allowing minority groups to exist and live peacefully. And then you make the transition to try to build institutions and independent parts of government. It's a very long process. We have to be understanding that these countries have gone through decades of dictatorial rule in places like Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Yemen. These countries don't have a history of living in democratic societies. So it's important to understand that we're not trying to impose values. We're not trying to say that they should follow an American or European or a German model. They should follow their own model, but understand that democracy includes some essential ingredients such as free and fair elections, independent institutions, rule of law, vibrant civil society, and an independent press. Those things are critical.